Sketch a graph of y equals x squared minus x minus 4 by finding the x and y intercepts and the vertex. Use the axis of symmetry to plot an additional point. Again, we'll begin with the vertex. We know that the x-coordinate of the vertex is given by the opposite of b over 2a. In this case, b is -1, so the opposite of b is +1. And then we've got 2 times a, which in this case is 1. So in this case, the vertex is given by x equals 1/2. This is a beautiful example of why it's important for us to use the vertex method instead of just a table of values, because no one would choose to have 1/2 in their table of values, and so you'd be very, very unlikely to happen upon the vertex in your table of values. Now, to find y, we need to plug in 1/2 for x. So we've got 1/2 squared minus 1/2 minus 4. Don't be scared of fractions. You can do it. 1/2 squared is 1/2 times 1/2. That's 1/4 minus 1/2 minus 4. To do this math, we can put the 4 over 1 to turn it into a fraction, and then we will need a common denominator. The common denominator we're going to use here is 4. So we've got 1/4. 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4. We multiply the top and bottom by 2. And then 4 over 1 is equivalent to 16/4. We're multiplying the top and bottom by 4. So once we have a common denominator, we can combine the numerators. 1 minus 2 minus 16 all over 4. 1 minus 2 is -1 minus 16 is -17/4. And if you use a calculator or even your brain to figure out what that is, that's going to be -4 and 1/4 or -4.25. So either one works. Our vertex is going to be at the point 1/2, comma, -4 and 1/4. So we're going to go to the right 1/2 and down 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1/4. And our vertex is going to be right about there. We can also draw in the axis of symmetry at this point, because we'll be using that later on. And then we can move on to the intercepts. We'll start with the y-intercept. That's always the easiest because it just comes from the constant term. In this case, we're going to have y equals -4, which we can plot right there. And then we can use the axis of symmetry to plot the mirror image of that point over here to the right. So we've got that. We can do all of these things in whichever order we want. I know in the other two videos, I've done things a little bit out of order. In the first one, I didn't do the axis of symmetry until the very end. Now I'm doing it earlier. Most of these things are independent of each other. You could start with the intercepts if you wanted to. It doesn't really matter. The only thing is that we can't do the mirror image until we've got the y-intercept and the axis of symmetry. But otherwise, you can do things in whatever order you want. Now for the x-intercepts, we need to let y be equal to 0 and then solve that quadratic equation. This one's not factorable because we cannot find two integers that have a product of -4 and a sum of -1. So we've got to use our good friend, the quadratic formula. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And in this case, we've got a equals 1, b equals -1, and c equals -4. Let's do this. We've got to do the opposite of b. Now, because b is -1, the opposite of that is +1, plus or minus the square root of b squared. 1 squared is 1, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 4, all over 2 times a, which is 1. Now we look underneath that square root, and that subtraction is going to change to an addition, because we're subtracting something that's being multiplied by a negative. And 4 times 1 times 4 is 16, so that's going to end up being 1 plus 16 under the radical. The denominator will be 2, and once we add the 1 and the 16 together, we've got 1 plus or minus the square root of 17 over 2. This is going to give us two different answers, 1 plus root 17 over 2, and 1 minus root 17 over 2. And we can use calculators to get decimal approximations for those. We're going to get 2.56 and negative 1.56. And so we can plot those on the x-axis. 2.56 is around right here. Negative 1.56 is about there. And now we have our 5 points. We can use these to sketch a graph of our parabola, which will look something like that. And this is the graph of y equals x squared minus x minus 4.